Today's reading is in Unit 5, Conservation. 2. Invasive species. Main ideas. Invasive species are a type of environmental threat. A food web is made up of producers, consumers, and decomposers. Invasive species compete with organisms in a native food web. What are Burmese pythons? In 2006, a park ranger at Everglades National Park in Florida stumbled upon a gruesome sight. He found a snake that had burst after it tried to eat a 2-meter-long alligator. The snake, a Burmese python, can grow to be 4 meters long. According to the conservationists, the Burmese python should never have been in Florida. The snakes are native to Southeast Asia. They invaded the Everglades in the late 1900s because people, who illegally kept the snakes as pets, released them into the wild when they got too big to take care of at home. What are the parts of a food web? The Burmese python's invasion of Everglades National Park changed the native food web. A food web is a network of food chains, which are the paths that energy travels as one organism eats another. There are 3 types of organisms in a food web. Producers are living things that make their own food from sunlight. All plants are producers because they have chloroplasts in their cells that collect the sun's energy. Chloroplasts give plants their green color. Consumers are living things that eat other living things. Consumers that eat only plants are called herbivores. Consumers that eat only animals are called carnivores. Consumers that eat both plants and animals are called omnivores. Decomposers are living things that eat the remains of other living things. They put nutrients in the soil that plants need to grow. How do invasive species affect a food web? Invasive species are environmental threats because they compete with native organisms for food. An invasive species can cause populations of native animals or plants to drop, affecting food resources for all living things. Asian long-horned beetles are invasive insects that hitchhiked to the United States on wooden crates used to transport goods by boat. The insects are native to eastern China, Japan, and Korea. The beetles were first discovered in the United States in 1996. The beetles quickly spread to temperate forest tree species in New England and the Midwest. Beetle larvae that hatch on a tree will burrow into the trunk for food and water. A tree that is infested by beetles will have small holes the size of dimes in its trunk. The holes weaken the tree and increase the risk of disease. Conservation efforts have tried to get rid of the beetles by cutting down infested trees. People are also not allowed to use tree wood imported from affected areas. In the know, invasive species. Invasive species are an environmental threat to native food webs around the world. Below are some invasive species. Zebra mussels, threatening North America. Cane toad, threatening Australia. Giant African land snail, threatening Bhutan. Prickly pear cactus, threatening South Africa. Common myna, threatening Australia. And common wasp, threatening New Zealand. Section 2. Try this on your own for extra credit. Model. Create a shoebox diorama of an environment near your location. For example, it could be a forest, lake, shoreline, or an urban street. Find out the different animals and plants that live there. Include at least 2 producers and 3 consumers that belong to the environment you choose. Research. Choose one of the following invasive species: Burmese pythons, Asian longhorned beetles, cane toads, or zebra mussels. Learn about where these species came from and which locations they are invading. Find out how they changed native food webs and what conservation efforts are being done to reduce their threat. Calculate. Keep a record of the food you eat for one day. What percentage of food comes from plants and what percentage of food comes from animals? Write. Write a fictional tale about an invasive species. Describe how native animals and plants lived before the invasive species entered their environment. Tell the readers how the invasive species entered the habitat and whether the invasive species can or cannot live in harmony with the native species. The glossary. 1. Conservation. The weighing of human needs against the needs of the environment to create a sustainable way for humans to live off of natural resources. 2. Consumer. A living thing that eats other living things. 3. Decomposer. A living thing that eats the remains of other living things, like bacteria. 4. Environmental threat. Anything that can cause harm to the environment, like pollution, deforestation, invasive species, overhunting, and climate change. 5. Food web. The network of paths, food chains, that energy travels when one organism eats another. 6. Invasive species. An organism that has been transported to an environment where it did not live before. 7. Pollution. A substance that has harmful or poisonous effects on the environment. 8. Producer. A living thing that makes its own food from sunlight, like plants.